Hello everyone, today I am here with new topic, new syllabus and new subjects political science. I will cover both political science and geography parallelly, and today's stance is what political science, and I am covering what first chapter of Laxmikanth, which is known to be what historical background. Now in 1600 AD, a company which was known to be what East India Company came to India for what? Trade. They came to India for doing what? Trade. Now they cannot come and they cannot simply come in India for doing trade. They has to get permission from the England. So it was the Queen who has given them permission to do trade in India. And the permission was also said to be what? An exclusive license. The permission is actually what? An exclusive license was given to East India Company. And what is exclusive license? This is exclusive license means what? It is only the East India Company who can trade with India from England. No other company of England can do trade with India. And this exclusive license was given by what? Queen of the England. That's why this exclusive license was also said to be what? Royal Charter. This exclusive license is also said to be what? Royal Charter. That means East India Company has got monopoly. They has got what? Monopoly to do trade with India. Now in that time, India was one of the rich countries in the world. A substantial amount of world GDP was covering by India. And I already mentioned that India was known as what? Soneki Syria in that time. That means India was so rich country, and this company was trading with India, and that means one of the richest country in the world. That's why this company became very rich. This company what? Became very rich, and they became what? Their muscle power rise and their political power also rise. As a result, what happens? In 1764, after winning the Battle of Buxar, after winning what? Battle of Buxar, they got the what? Diwani rights. After winning what? Battle of Buxar, they got the Diwani rights from the Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. They got what? Diwani rights from the states of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. In that time, it was not known as state. These were what? Provinces. So East India Company, after winning Battle of Buxar, they got the Diwani rights over Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. Now what is actually Diwani rights? These Diwani rights are nothing but what? They got the rights to collect civil revenue taxes. They got the right to collect civil revenue tax. That means they got the right to collect the revenue and tax from the citizen of India. That means what? If you got the right to collect the revenue and tax from India, that means we the Indian are doing lots of works where it is our hard work, we are manufacturing those things and it is our cultivation, but the output, which is known to be the revenue or tax, were taken by what? East India Company. Now what happens? After that, what happens? After that, the company officers of the East India Company, the company officer of the East India Company, what happens? They were involved in lots of mismanagement, and they were also involved in corruption. They were involved in corruption, mismanagement. Because of this corruption and mismanagement, what happens? Company officers and the workers become very rich, but as a company, they a great loss. That means as a company, great loss has been occurred. That means they become what? They become what? Losers. Company become what? Losers, because great loss has been occurred as a whole, East India Company, but their officers were become what? Rich, because they were involved in mismanagement or malpractices or in corruption. Because of that reason, East India Company as a whole were in great loss. Now what they did, they went back to the what? England. They went back to the what? England, and they asked to help them. That means East India Company went back to the England and they asked for some help. The England government, they become very angry. The England government become very angry. When they become very angry, they what? As a retaliation, what they did, as a retaliation, they try to, as a retaliation, the England government what? Try to control the affairs of East India Company in India. Okay, East India Company in India. So what happens? East India Company become very rich once, but since their workers and officers were involved in mismanagement or in corruptions, because of which after some years or after some days, what happens? They as a company, great loss occurs as a company, but their officers became very rich. When as a company their loss occurs, they went back to England and asked to help them. Then what happens? England government becomes very angry, and what happens? As a retaliation, they try to control the affairs of East India Company in India. Now question is, how they control the affairs of East India Company India? What happens? East India Company earlier, before this, what happens? East India Company, the England government, they did not look after the East India Company. East India Company were doing whatever they doing in India. It's up to their wish. That means it was the East India Company were given the complete independent powers in India. But after that, what happens? After heavy corruptions, what happens? They try to, the British government try to control the affairs of East India Company India. Now, how they will control the affairs of the East India? What happens? The charter which has been given to them will be what? Will be revised. The charter which has been given to the East India Company will be revised. Its terms and condition in every 20 years. That means the charter which was given by the England Queen to the East India Company will be revised its term and condition in every 20 years. Okay, in every 20 years the charter will be revised its terms and conditions. And for that reason, what happens? In 1773, first charter was passed. First charter act was what? Passed. Or in 1773 you can say first regulating act was what? Passed. First regulating act was passed. After 1773, after 20 years it will become 1793, then it will be 1813, then it will be 1833, Then it will be 1853. 1853 is the what? Last Charter Act. So in 1773, first regulating act was passed, which was also said to be a Charter Act. Okay. Why the Charter Act was passed? Because the East India Company were involved in mismanagement or corruption, because of which East India Company were in great loss, and in retaliation what happens? British government tried to control over the affairs of East India Company in India. Now how they will try to control? They wanted to revise its terms and condition in every 20 years. That means the charter which was given to the East India Company will be revised its terms and condition in every 20 years. And in that regard, first Charter Act was passed in 1773. Okay. Now we will study the first Charter Act. What were the things happen in the first Charter Act? Okay. We will study what? First Charter Act 1773 or First Regulating Act 1773. So 1773 Regulating Act. We are going to what? Study. Regulating Act. Okay, we'll study 1773 Regulating Act. What happens? Earlier, you see, first step was what? The British government asked East India Company to form what? Court of Director. First step was what? In 1773 Regulating Act, first step was what? The British government asked the East India Company to form what? Court of Director. Okay. Now this Court of Director was what? Answerable. They were answerable to what? To the British government. That means whatever things East India Company will do in India, this Court of Directors have to answer to the what? British government. Okay, that means everything East India Company will do in India have to be answered what? To the British government, and this answerable body was what? Court of Director. Now what happens? It was what? In 1773 what? It was the first step of centralization. It was the what? First step of what? Centralization. It was the first step of centralization. Now what do you mean by that? You see, suppose, okay, this is not clear. Let me do nicely. Okay, this is what? Bombay Presidency. This was what? Madras Presidency. This was what? Bengal Presidency. Bengal, Bombay and Madras. They have executive powers as well as legislative powers. Madras also have executive powers as well as legislative powers. They also have executive powers as well as legislative powers. Now what is legislative powers? What is the difference between legislative powers and executive powers? I will do when I will do Parliament chapter, then it will be very clear for you. Now executive, I can show you in the present day. What are the executive? Executive means, if you consider in the present day government, who execute the plans, and legislative means what? Who make the laws. Who make the laws are called legislatives, and who execute the laws are called executives. Okay, in present context, if you consider, suppose we have 545 members in Lok Sabha. Okay, and these all 545 are said to be what? Legislators. They are said to be what? Legislators. Okay, now out of this 545, there were few members who are known as what? Executive. Who are known as what? Executive. And these executives are nothing but what? Ministers. The ministers involved are said to be what? The ministers involved are said to be what? Executives, and other members are said to all members are legislators. All 545 legislators, including executive are also legislators. But ministers, for example, minister, they are considered as what? Executives. So all 545 members are legislators, but out of these 545 members, there are few members who are considered to be what? Executives, and these executives are most probably what? Ministers are said to be what? Executives. Okay, I think legislators and the executive, I think you are clear. So legislative means what? All these 545 members are said to be legislators. Out of these 545 members, there are few members who execute the plans, and those are said to be executive members, and those are not, in special case, they are said to be what? Minister. In India, all the ministers are said to be executive. They execute the plans. Now, what is the difference between the executive IAS officer and these ministers? IAS officer are what? Permanent executives, and their ministers are what? Temporary executives, because they are held only for 5 years, and after 5 years they have to again come by election, but they are what? Permanent. Okay, they are permanent once they are selected. Okay, so this is what about executive and legislators. So let us go back to this topic. So Bombay have this presidency have executive as well as legislative body. They also have executive and legislative body. They have also executive and legislative body. So what happens? Few legislative powers of Bombay and Madras have been curtailed. First step of centralization means what? Few legislative powers of Bombay and Madras have been curtailed. I am saying few, not all legislative powers. Few legislative powers of Bombay and Madras have been curtailed, and these legislative powers have been given to the governor of what? Bengal. The few legislative powers of Bombay and Madras have been curtailed, and these, whatever the legislative powers have been curtailed, these have been added to the what? Governor of what? Bengal. That means what? That's why the governor of Bengal is also said to be what? After this, governor of, since he is getting more power, more legislative powers, so the governor of Bengal was said to be what? Governor General of Bengal. And first Governor General of Bengal was what? Warren Hastings. So why he said to Governor General of Bengal? Why Governor of Bengal was said to be the Governor General of Bengal? Because the Governor of Bengal was given or have acquired more legislative powers than that of Madras and the Bombay. Okay, so Governor of Bengal was said to be what? Governor General of Bengal. That means first step of centralization means what? What is centralization? Centralization means what? Acquiring concentration of powers into single point. So this is the first step of concentration of powers. That means the few legislative powers of Bombay and Madras have been curtailed, and these are being added to the Governor of Bengal. That means what they are doing? They are acquiring the powers, and they are curtailing these powers and added to one point. So this is what? Concentration of the powers. So concentration of powers at a single point is said to be centralization. Now why they are doing the centralization? Because what happens? India was a very large country, so for them it is very difficult to control all parts of the India. So if this become what? Concentrate, this become what? Centralized. That means if the power is concentrated to only this point, what happens? It becomes very easy for the England to control India. That's why this was the first step of centralization. Okay, and Governor of Bengal have become what? Governor General of Bengal in 1773. It is the first step of centralization. And one more thing, I think one more thing had happened in the what? One more thing had happened in the Regulating Act. What is that? What is that act? One more thing had happened, I think, and that is what? Establishment of Supreme Court. Okay, establishment of Supreme Court at Calcutta. Calcutta in 1774. Okay, establishment of Supreme Court at Calcutta in 1774. Now what happens in 1781? Because of establishment of Supreme Court in India, okay, because of what? Establishment of Supreme Court in India, what happened? An act has been passed which was in British in 1781. Okay, in 1781 in British, one act has been passed, that is Settlement Act. What? Settlement Act. Settlement Act. What happening? Since Supreme Court has been established, the Supreme Court was, that means the worker or officers of East India Company, the workers and officers of East India Company was under control of the Supreme Court. Okay, and these workers and officers are also under the control of what? Executive Council. Executive Council. Now what is Executive Council? Executive Council means what? When Governor General of Bengal was formed, what happens? In order to help him or in order to aid him, what happened? Governor General Council was formed. Governor General Council was formed in order to help Governor General of Bengal. Now in Governor General of Council, there were 4 executive members. There were 4 executive members. Okay, these 4 executive members were formed in order to help Governor General of Bengal. These 4 executive members were also what? And these workers and officers of East India Company were also under the control of what? Executive Council. So workers and officers are under the control of Supreme Court, as well as they are also under the control of what? Executive Council. Because of this, what happened? An act has been passed in England which is what? Settlement Act. According to this Settlement Act, what happens? The Supreme Court has been asked not to control worker and officers. And the looking or the control of this worker and officer of East India Company, the controlling was given only to what? Executive Council. Only this Executive Council can control what? Workers and officers, not the Supreme Court, according to this Settlement Act. Now in India, what happens? We find it what? We find Article 50. What is the Article 50? Separation of judiciary. Article 50 is what? Article 50 is what? Separation of judiciary. Separation of judiciary from executive. Separation of judiciary. Separation of judiciary from executive. Okay, so this is what? Article 50. So Article 50 was in that era in 1781. What? Separation of judiciary from executive. So this is the example. Okay, now we have separation of judiciary from executive, Article 50. In 1781 it was there in England. What? The workers and officers of the East India Company were what? Were controlled by Executive Council, and Supreme Court was asked not to control over them. Okay, this is what Settlement Act. Now what happens? Britishers or British government was in Britain or in England, and East India Company are in what? India. And from 1600 AD they were doing trade in India. So what happens? Now the British government is interfering with the work of what? East India Company, because of which East India Company what? Become angry, and they are not cooperating with what? The East India Company were not cooperating with what? British government. That's why in 1784, Younger the Pitch or Pitch the Younger. Okay, Pitch the Younger means what? Father of peace was also what? King of the England, and after that Pitt became the what? King of England. Okay, so Pitt the younger means what? Father of Pitt was earlier what? King of England. Now his son Pitt become what? King of the England. So what happens? Since East India Company is not obeying, what? British government. So what happened? The Pitt the younger passed what? One more act, that is called Pitt India Act. That is called what? Pitt India Act. Pitt India Act. Now what is Pitt India Act? Pitt India Act means what? Earlier what happens? Court of Director was looking into political, administrative and what? Military affairs of the country. Political, administrative and military affairs of India was looking by what? Court of Director. Court of Director was looking into this matter. Now what happens? These three things, political, administrative and military department were given to one board, that is called Board of Control. Board of Control. Earlier these three PAM, political, administrative and military functions were performed by Court of Director. Now these functions were to be performed by Board of Control, and this Board of Control will be appointed by what? British government. So the power of Court of Director, which was established by what? East India Company, was what? Their power has been minimized because political, administrative and military function has been transformed into what? Board of Control, and this Board of Control what? Will be appointed by what? British government. Now Court of Director, they will be limited to only what? Some commercial matters. That means they will do only commercial functions. And Board of Control will do political, administrative and military functions. Thus dual government is said to be formed. Okay, now dual government was said to be formed because the Court of Director which was looking political, administrative and military functions, now only given what? Commercial functions, and these three functions were given to what? Board of Control, and this Board of Control was appointed by what? British government. So this is said to be what? Dual government. Dual government was formed at Pitt India Act of 1784. Okay, and for the first time the British government told that whatever the territory that was occupied by what? East India Company under what? British possession. Okay, under British possession. So what happens? The territory which was occupying by East India Company in India, for the first time the British government declared that it is under what? British possession. So slowly and steadily what happens? British government is diminishing the power of East India Company in India. So this is what? Pitt India Act of 1784. Now we'll get two more. Actually after that an act has been passed at 1793 and 1813, but these two are not in the syllabus of Laxmikanth. So till time being I am not doing, because I am following only Laxmikanth. So I will not do now, later I will do. Okay, so now one of the most important act which was passed is said to be what? 1833 Charter Act. Okay, it is very important. 1833 Charter Act. Now what was happening in 1833 Charter Act? I already done this what? In 1733, this was what? Bombay Presidency. This was what? Madras Presidency. And this was what? Bengal Presidency. Okay, Bengal Presidency. Bombay, Madras and Bengal Presidency. They were having executive powers, legislative powers, executive powers, legislative powers. But in 1773, what happened? In 1773, few legislative powers of Bombay, few legislative powers of Madras have been transferred to what? Bengal, Governor of Bengal. Now, at 1833, what happens? Whatever remaining legislative powers were there in Bombay Governor and in Madras, all legislative powers have been curtailed and it was given to what? Bengal. That means the Bengal was given what? More power. The Governor of Bengal was given more power. That means complete centralization has been occurred. Complete centralization has been occurred what? In 1833 Charter Act. So complete centralization means what? All the legislative powers of Bombay and Madras have been curtailed and these have been added to what? Bengal Governor General of Bengal. Now why they are doing this? That means they are doing this what? Because the British government they are hungry of power, so they wanted to concentrate all powers in one place so that they can use India, or they can use India at a single point. If I already mentioned, if the centralized will be there, then it is very easy to run India from England at one point. So concentration of powers was done at one point so that it is very easy for them to run from the what? England. Otherwise, if the powers is concentrated at different places, it becomes very difficult to run India, since India is one of the largest country in the world. Now, this is said to be a complete centralization has been occurred. That means India are in what? Colony. Complete colonization. India were in complete colonization in what? 1833. India were in complete colonization in what? 1833. And since the Governor General of Bengal has got more legislative powers, or all legislative powers, that's why Governor General of Bengal now said to be what? Governor General of India. Governor General of what? India. And Governor General of India, what? It was first Governor General of India was what? Lord William Bentinck. Since he has got more power, okay, from all provinces, all legislative powers obtained by what? William Bentinck. So he was said to be what? Governor General of whole India. And okay, and what has been happened here? Regulations, laws were converted into what? Acts. Earlier, the laws were what? Laws were passed by executives or regulations. Laws were said to be what? Regulations, because they were passed by executives. Now, since legislative sanctions are also available, so these laws are said to be what? Acts. Since legislative sanctions is also available, so these laws are said to be what? Acts. Okay. And one more thing happened. What that thing? That thing was what? The East India Company was was remain only what? A administrative body. That means they have earlier they were considered as what? In 1730 the early acts they were considered as what? They were supposed to be what? Commercial body. Now they are in 1833 they are said to be, they are remain limited only to be what? Administrative body. In 1833 they were limited to the only administrative body. They have lost the commercial and other functions. They only limited to what? Administrative body. And one more thing had happened. What is that thing? It is said to be, what is that thing? One more thing had happened, and it is said to be what? Convened civil service. Actually in that time civil service was of two types. One was the lower civil service, another was higher civil service. The higher civil service is said to be what? Convened civil service. And what happens in that era? There was a college which was said to be Belbury. Okay, and this was the college. If somebody wanted to be what? Civil servants, he has to study in this college. If somebody wanted to be civil service, he has to study at this college. After the finishing of his studies, he automatically become what? Civil servant. But question is, in order to study in this college, the person has to be sponsored. He has to be sponsored what? By court of director. The court of director has to be sponsored. That means the person who wanted to be study in this college, and their person have to be must have taken sponsored from what? Court of director. Court of director, that means sponsor the person who wanted to be study in this college have to be sponsored by what? Court of director. And this court of director was what? Part of what? These were established by what? East India Company. East India Company was established what? Court of director. So the IS officer must be what? Loyal to East India Company. Okay, IS officer must be what? Loyal to this East India Company, because they have to get sponsored by court of directors so that they can take admission what? In Belbury. So after they are studying, how can they betray? They must be loyal what? To the East India Company. Because of this, what happens? That means an open civil service and a competitive exam. That means there was a open exam. There is a proposal of open exam in the 1833 Charter Act. There was a proposal of open exam for convened civil service. Okay, but this was completely opposed by what? The East India Company and Court of Director, because of which it could not pass. So there was not open exam, open competition. There was not open competition, and because of which Indians were also failed to be an IS officer. Because if there will be open examination, then Indian can also participate now. So these things happened in 1833 Charter Act. Okay, and 1833 Charter Act, one more thing had happened. What is that thing? The East India Company were treated as a trust. They were treated as a what? Trust by British government. And last Charter Act, which was passed in what? In the year what? The last Charter Act was passed in the year what? 1853. Last Charter Act was passed in the year what? 1853. In 1853, last Charter Act was passed, and what happened? This time, for convened civil service, open examination was what? This was what? Allowed. Okay, in this act, open examination was allowed for convened civil service, and because of which what happened, earlier the civil servants were loyal to what? Civil servants were loyal to the East India Company, and because of passing of this, because now there will be open examination, because of which their civil servants which earlier used to be loyal to the East India Company, now these civil servants cannot be loyal to the what? They are not loyal to the what? East India Company. Since they are not loyal, why they are not loyal? Because these civil servants they become civil servants after passing the examination. So they were not taking sponsorship from what? Court of director, because of which the East India Company, the IS officer were what? IS officer were not loyal to East India Company, not loyal to what? East India Company. Since IS officer were not loyal, so it's become very difficult for East India Company to survive in what? In India, to survive in India. And what happens after 1853? After 1853, what happens? Indefinite period was given. Indefinite period was given to East India Company. Indefinite period was given to what? East India Company. That means what happened? Earlier 20 years were given. Now at any time, what happens? The British government can take the powers from East India Company. Okay, that means now already the East India powers of the East India Company were diminishing, but now after what happened, when convenient civil service examination was open, due to which the civil servants were not loyal to the East India Company, now this East India Company just they are in the name, and because they are just in the name, okay, no powers are left, and at any time British government can snatch their powers whatever they are having. And one more important thing happened, that in that time Indian Central Legislative Council was established. That means this is what? A sort of local government were given to what? Indians. A sort of local government was given to what? Indians. And this is what they are saying, that we are doing Ahsan to India. Okay, we are doing what? Ahsan to India. According to what? According to British government. Okay, according to British government. Okay, now I think everything I have covered in what? 1853 Charter Act. Okay, now this was the last Charter Act. Okay, this was the last Charter Act, because indefinite period was given to East India Company. At any time the powers of East India Company may snatched by what? British government. So this was what? Last Charter Act. Now rest of the portions I will do in another class. Thank you very much.